Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 67. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different than all the previous teams that we've had. Today is the day that I am making my channel's Discord server open for people to join. However, there's a twist. This Pokemon team that I've made holds the key to getting into the server, so you have to use your wit to solve the ARG to discover the 10 letters and numbers for the invite link for the official Fire Farmer 123 Discord server. Throughout the video, you'll notice a multitude of clues that you'll have to bring together to crack the code. Feel free to point out anything you notice in the comment section, but please don't just share the invite link if you figure it out. I will make the Discord server invite public after some time, but in the meantime, there will be some secret events and you'll be able to see some videos early, so try your best. Also, I didn't try to make the ARG difficult, but this is my first ARG, so there might be some things that'll go wrong that I'll try to correct in the post if people aren't getting it. So let's go over the actual team here. First off, we have Magmar, who is a very good redirection Pokemon because it can hold the Eviolite since it is not a fully evolved Pokemon, and we have the Follow Me option for redirecting hits, as well as we also have the Helping Hand for increasing the damage that the Pokemon next to Magmar does, as well as we have Clear Smog for getting rid of stat changes that are on the opponent, and we have Fire Punch just to do good fire type damage into the opponent. And both of Magmar's abilities are pretty good, as Vital Spirit causes you to not get put to sleep, but I decided to run Flame Body mostly so that whenever we are redirecting Pokemon that have contact moves, we can hopefully burn them in order to increase the survivability of our other Pokemon. But in case we do need to redirect a sleep, we are Terra Grass, which will help out with most of the sleepers in the format. Next up, we have Tentacruel, and Tentacruel actually had a pretty funny showing at one of the recent regionals during one of the live stream battles, and Tentacruel is kind of nifty because it is a water poison type that benefits from being a physical attacker because we have the Clear Body ability, which means that we will not be getting affected by Intimidate, but it also means that we can avoid things like Icy Wind speed drops or just general stat drops that we really don't want to have to deal with on Tentacruel. And Tentacruel is already a fairly fast Pokemon, so I EV'd it in order to outspeed things like Goldengo, and you still have a good amount of HP and special defense in order to take special hits on Tentacruel, so in the right place, in the right time, Tentacruel can actually do really good in the format. It's just that we have a lot of physical attackers in the format right now that Tentacruel doesn't really like to see. But on Tentacruel, we are going to be running 2 stabs in Liquidation and Poison Jab, 2 very strong stab options, and the knockoff just to get rid of the opponent's item and to give us some type coverage is very nice. And we have the Swords Dance, since hopefully on this team we can create paths for Tentacruel to click Swords Dance and then just start picking up KOs into things like Incineroar or Rillaboom or any real common threats in the format that Tentacruel can just like kind of outspeed and KO in one hit. And we are leftovers on Tentacruel in order to increase our survivability over time, and we're Terra Flying mostly so that we are dodging ground type attacks, but it is nice to have a grass type resist when we were previously neutral to grass. Next up, I decided to select Granbull on this team because we needed an Intimidate Pokemon, and Granbull is a pretty quirky Intimidate Pokemon just because there's not very many scenarios where you would prefer to use Granbull over another Intimidator. However, we have a lot of moves on Granbull actually. Before making this team, I did not realize one of the main strengths of Granbull is just that it has so many different types of move in its move pool. Like, even if I scroll down here, we got like Ice Punch, we got Psychic Fangs, we have Shadow Ball, we have Rock Slide. There's just so many good moves that Granbull gets. Unfortunately, it really doesn't have much of its base stats to hold it up other than like its attack stat. So we are running mid-speed because we have Trick Room with Hypno, so hopefully whenever a Pokemon like Magmar and Hypno gets up the Trick Room, Granbull can take advantage of it by switching in and getting down the Intimidate, and we won't be affected by other Intimidate users because we have our own Clear Amulet preventing our
stats from being dropped, and we have Play Rough for our good stab type damage. We have Wild Charge for a bit of surprising electric type damage into things like water types, and we have the Outrage, mostly because we're Terra Dragon. We can lock Terra Dragon to give us some useful resistances, and then we can just let the Outrage rip, and hopefully that does enough damage to like bring an opponent down to like 70%, where maybe one of these other Pokemon can clean up that hit. And in case we get faked out on Granbull, we also have the Stomping Tantrum option, which if Granbull is unable to move on the previous turn for whatever reason, we will get double damage. The Stomping Tantrum is especially nice because like we can whiff the Play Rough, but then we have the Stomping Tantrum to save us, or if Wild Charge ends up going into a ground type, or Outrage ends up going into a fairy type or something like that. Next up on the team, we got Hypno, who is going to be our Trick Room setter, and Hypno actually has two pretty good abilities in this format. I would say it's Hypno's biggest strength are its ability to either be Insomnia, so we don't care about sleep from opposing Amoonguses, and we can put them to sleep ourselves with the Hypnosis, but we also have the Inner Focus, which is the more important one for us because it allows us to get out of Trick Room, because the Fake Out is pretty prevalent, but Inner Focus makes it so that we won't be getting flinched, so we have a pretty safe option to get up Trick Room if we lead like Hypno and Malamar, because Malamar can redirect for Hypno if we want to try and go for a Hypnosis turn 1 and then Trick Room turn 2, or we could just flat out go for that Trick Room turn 1. And then to add some disruption onto Hypno, we also have the Disable to force it so that once we get Trick Room up, we can disable an opponent into their strongest move that they probably used to try and keep our Trick Room from going up previously. And the Nightshade is just also nice for a guaranteed amount of chip each turn. As well as we are running the Wide Lens on the Hypno in order to increase the accuracy of our Hypnosis to be about 70. Like, it is 66%, which is still not great, but I would prefer to have as much accuracy on Hypnosis as you can get, so it's probably best to be using the Wide Lens. And we're Terra Grass on the Hypno just so that we're not getting put to sleep mostly by powder moves. Next up on the team, we have King Gambit, and King Gambit is here as a really strong Trick Room option, as we don't have very much setup on the King Gambit. We just mostly have coverage moves, which are great for our offenses, and of course on King Gambit, you gotta have that Kowtow Cleave to do a clean 85 base power Dark type move as your signature move, and then Sucker Punch is also a really good move to have on King Gambit in order to make it so that whenever you don't have Trick Room up, you can still outspeed your opponent with the priority. And Low Kick is nice for being able to beat other King Gambits. For example, since we are running a Trick Room team, we don't have a lot of Trick Room components, so having King Gambit to beat other King Gambits is good. And we are Terra Fairy, Terra Blast, mostly just so that we have a better way to check dragons, because I love Granbull, but Granbull is not checking too many dragons in this format. But Terra Fairy is also nice because we can catch like a fighting type move and then deal back super effective damage with our Terra Fairy, Terra Blast. As well, of course, you run Defiant on King Gambit so that if you get intimidated, it's going to increase your attack instead of dropping it, and we are Assault Vest just to make it so that we can take special attacks a little bit better on King Gambit. Since we don't have Protect or anything on this King Gambit, it makes sense to run the Assault Vest. And lastly, on the team, we have Smeargle, and Smeargle is a nice add-on because it gives us some better abilities to set up Trick Room, because we are a really fast Spore Mon, so we can put something to sleep and then have Hypno get up the Trick Room. And then on Smeargle, we also have the Shed Tail in case we just want to leave turn 1 and give our own Pokemon a substitute to get set up inside the Trick Room, because then we also don't have to worry about the Spore again because we'll have a substitute up, but it'll also give them like one free hit. And the Stall Cure is kind of nice to be able to stall out your opponents, as we are moody, so it does benefit Smeargle to sit on the field for longer to get better moody boost. And in order to try and save ourselves, we have the Soap Trap, who I'm not sure if we're going to have Spide Ups at all during the 128 teams challenge, so this might be the only time that we ever mention Silk Trap. But Silk Trap makes it so that any Pokemon that makes contact with the Silk Trap will have their speed dropped. And so more often than not, you'll see like Baneful Bunker or Burning Bulwark on Smeargle in order to status the opponent. However, since we are Spore Smeargle, it benefits us more to not status the opponent, and we don't have King Shield in this format, so we're just going to have to go with the Silk Trap. I mean, Silk Trap Speed Drop also has benefits, because if a Pokemon is originally faster than Smeargle, and then we Silk Trap, and then they get their speed dropped by the Silk Trap, then that means that Smeargle will be able to outspeed them with the Spore, and then can start Salt Curing them, and then that could be like an endgame. And then we also have these safety goggles on Smeargle just so that Smeargle itself is not the one getting put to sleep, but it also means that we're not being redirected by Pokemon that have Rage Powder. And we're Terra Ghost just so we can avoid a Fake Out on Smeargle if it comes down to it. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles.
Alright, so first up we have a Lilycole team, but they also have Tentacruel and King Gambit, which I was not expecting to see both of these Pokemon today. But I lead my best thing into Lilycole, which is Magmar and Tentacruel, and the opponent leads Lilligant and Torkoal, so we do get the lead pretty right here. But Lilligant starts with a Protect, as Magmar goes for the Follow Me, as I thought Lilligant was louder, but they actually yawn with Torkoal, so we're already kind of off-put there, as they swap Torkoal into the Indeedee and get a Spit F buff, and I redirect again, and I go for Solar Blade, which Magmar takes pretty well, and it does burn the Lilligant, but we Poison Jab into Lilligant, which takes it down to its Sash, but the burn is going to take it out there, as Magmar unfortunately falls asleep, and now they get to bring in Ursaluna, so I bring in Granbull just to intimidate the Ursaluna, and we knock off into Indeedee to try and deal some damage to it, but Indeedee is going to get up the Trick Room, so now things are going to get a little bit more difficult. I just try to sack Magmar here, but they decided to attack into Tentacruel instead, which is a little unfortunate, but now we get to bring in Hypno, and I bring back in Granbull again to reapply the Intimidate, as Indeedee is still following, and Hypno takes the Facade at least, and we get to invert the Trick Room there, as now the opponent swaps in Torkoal in order to get rid of Ursaluna's drops, and I tried disabling the whatever would get hit here, but I think a better move might have been to try and sleep the Indeedee and attack the Ursaluna, but they just get to Facade into Magmar here, and Hypno is slower than Ursaluna as we catch the Weather Ball. So, unfortunately, the Lilycole lead did not go in our favor here, even with Granbull in the back, and we Terra Dragon Granbull just to maybe try and get out of this with the Outrage, but the Torkoal goes for Yawn here for whatever reason. The Facade from Ursaluna is going to finish this game off. So, unfortunately, we start with a bit of a loss here, but I think there were some turns there where I could have acted a little bit better by turn 1, like swapping Magmar directly into Granbull, so that way we could intimidate the Lilligant. So even if the Lilligant did attack into Tentacruel that one turn, then Tentacruel would have been fine. Since I had already shown off the redirection with Magmar, so it was fine if the Lilligant probably wasn't going to Sleep Powder us in hindsight. And then because I had Granbull and Tentacruel on the field, it would be easier for me to attack into the Indeedee to keep them from getting Trick Room up, which was very important. Here we have a bit of a Psy-Spam Rain team, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to handle Psy-Spam using this team. But they're at least not a Trick Room Psy-Spam team, because their Indeedee is an Indeedee male. The game starts, and they lead Indeedee and Sneasler, and we get to send in Kingambit and Magmar, and Kingambit at least won't be affected by the Expanding Force, and if they wanted to close combat into Kingambit, we can just redirect it with Magmar, and Magmar could probably take at least 2 Expanding Forces, was the thought process in my head. So Sneasler gets off his Psychic Seed there, and we do try to redirect with Magmar as Darkclaw comes out to it, and Expanding Force comes out, and we're going to be able to take one more attack with Magmar, is what it happens to look like. And we follow me with Magmar again as Darkclaw goes into Magmar, and on the second time we get to proc the Flame Body, which is very beneficial for us. And the Indeedee reveals that it's not Scarf, but we take it out with the Kowtow Cleave anyways, and Sneasler's going to take some bird damage. And now they reveal that they have Hatterene, as I Terra Fairy Kingambit, and they Terra Dark their Sneasler, and Hypno lives, thankfully, because of the burn on the Sneasler, and I try to do damage to Hatterene just to get rid of it, and Hatterene Mystical Fired into Kingambit, which actually activates our Defiant, which is pretty clutch, and Sneasler tries Dire Clawing into Kingambit, but thankfully none of the Dire Claw effects proc, and we Nightshade into Hatterene in order to take it out, and we can just Terra Blast into Sneasler in order to take it out there. And their last Pokemon is Dragonite, who happens to have Iron Head, so they can at least get rid of Kingambit, and we miss the Hypnosis into it. But our last Pokemon is Smeargle, who Dragonite chooses to lock in Extreme Speed here, but it's not able to quite KO Hypno, as we get some Nightshade damage into it while it is asleep. And Smeargle's speed went up, but we get the Sulcure into Dragonite here, and the defense drop on Smeargle is the most important thing, because we might be extreme speedable now that we're not Focus Sash, and Dragonite does wake up here, but it decides to attack into the Hypno, where if it didn't decide to attack into Hypno, we would have gotten off the Nightshade, and that would have KO'd Dragonite there. So Smeargle gets to stall at the end game, and even if the Dragonite wasn't within range there, we still had another Silk Trap use that we could have used to try and outlive the Dragonite, or at least get rid of our defense drop. Like, the defense drop here is the worst thing possible. Here we have a more direct Trick Room team, as all of these components benefit from Trick Room, and they have 3 Pokemon that can set up Trick Room in the Farigiraf, the Poltegeist, and the Armarouge. So in this game, they decided to leave Farigiraf and Armarouge, and I'm okay with that because we lead Tentacruel and Malamar, and even though Tentacruel is weak to Psychic-type moves, it's not super likely that both of these Pokemon carry Psychic-type moves, and Tentacruel has a lot of special bulk, and these are both special attackers, so I really am not super scared of Tentacruel taking a Psychic-type attack, but we also have Magmar to redirect those attacks. And so I turn 1 just decided to Helping Hand into Tentacruel to try and keep Trick Room from going up, but they actually Trick Room with Armarouge instead of Farigiraf, so we don't get the 50-50 right there. As Armarouge reveals Fling, which raises Malamar's special attack, but it's kind of beneficial for them because, like, we could have knocked off the Armarouge slot, but instead we get to Liquidation, which doesn't quite KO them. I'm continuing to redirect for Tentacruel because I really don't want to get hit by a Psychic-type move, as it's a really important component right now, and Farigiraf's weakness policy actually gets procced by the knockoff, which is kind of annoying here, but it's one of the benefits of trying to run these battles quickly in the closed team sheet format, and Liquidation is not enough to pick up KO on Farigiraf. Now we get to bring in Hypno, who is the slowest on the field, so it can just Nightshade into Armarouge, and we are going to take a lot of Hyper Voice damage, but the Tentacruel is going to be able to pick off the Farigiraf, as now the Trick Room is going to end, and they reveal Conkeldurr and Kingambit in the back, and I predicted that Kingambit was going to Sucker Punch, so I decided to Swords Dance with Tentacruel, and we put the Kingambit to sleep as Conkeldurr knocks off into Hypno in order to KO it there, but the Conkeldurr is now burned, and we Terra Fairy our Kingambit, my bad, and we Liquidation and Terra Fairy Terra Blast into Conkeldurr in order to knock it out, and as long as Kingambit doesn't do something crazy here, we can just double into Kingambit again, as it's asleep, but it probably didn't matter what Kingambit did this turn unless it went for like an Iron Head crit flinch into our Kingambit and then got like a Sucker Punch, maybe not even a Sucker Punch crit into Tentacruel, but we could have Swords Danced a little bit more to try and stall with Tentacruel. We got Leftovers recovery back. But that was just a really good Tentacruel game where Tentacruel was faster than like all the non-Trick Room components, and it was able to hold its own inside of the Trick Room because it's just so darn Spadef bulky. Here we have a balanced Rain team where they have like the Archaludon, but they also have the Blood Moon Ursaluna, who is a very high damage component, and of course Amoonguss for redirection is a bit of a struggle. That's why we have so many anti-Amoonguss things on this team. The battle starts out and they lead Pelipper and Ursaluna as we lead Smeargle and Kingambit, as I figure Kingambit's going to be my most important piece into this team. And they immediately Earth Power into Kingambit, which means that their Ursaluna is Choice Scarf, as the Weather Ball comes out into Kingambit, and that is going to KO it there, since Smeargle gets a speed boost, which is kind of nice, because now we can put things to sleep super quickly. And they decide to swap out Pelipper there, and I Silk Trapped so that Smeargle would not get hit just in case Pelipper stayed in. But we get to Hypnosis the Archaludon, which is pretty lucky here on our about 60% chance. And we can just full-on Spore into Ursaluna this turn, as both Pokemon are forced to take sleep turns, and we can start Nightshading away the Archaludon's health. And now that the Ursaluna has been put to sleep, we are in a position with Smeargle where we can try to start getting Moody Boost over time as we Sulk Cure into the Archaludon. So we're naturally chipping away the Archaludon's health, and we've disabled the Ursaluna, so since it's Choice Scarf, it won't be able to go for another move again. So the Ursaluna is forced to switch out, and it switches into Amoonguss in the back, and we still trap Smeargle just in case the Archaludon woke up here, and we Nightshade into the Archaludon to nearly get rid of its health, but it is leftovers, so it gets to survive there. But we can swap in Magmar here, as I didn't want Hypno to be the one falling to sleep, and Archaludon wakes up, and we just Sulk here into Amoonguss as we reveal Safety Goggles with our Smeargle, and Archaludon is taken out by the Sulk here there, so it is now a 3v3, as they bring back in Pelipper, but we still have our Speed Boost, and they decide to swap out Amoonguss here, as we Terra Grassed our Magmar, just so I can try and... I actually don't remember what I do here, but we put Pelipper to sleep pretty much with our super speedy Smeargle so that Pelipper isn't attacking anything, and we clear Smog with Pelipper into Pelipper in order to try and deal some damage into it, as Smeargle is continuing to stack its boost, and it does have a Spadef boost right now, which is pretty helpful against the Ursaluna, Pelipper, Amoonguss endgame, but the opponent is just not dealing with it anymore, as we have Hypno in the back who could like Trick Room for Ursaluna after we like put it back to sleep with Smeargle, and ideally what happens is Magmar like gets KO'd by Ursaluna, and then we use Smeargle to put Ursaluna to sleep after Pelipper has been knocked out, and then we could use the Hypno in order to disable the Ursaluna, so then the Ursaluna would be forced to struggle. Here we have what looks to be a Perish Trap team, as whenever you see Lapras and Gothitelle together, 99% of the time it's a Perish Trap team. So our best answer to Perish Trap is to lead Hypno, who does not care about the Fake Out, and we lead the Smeargle, who can Terrestrialize into Ghost, which means that it won't be able to be trapped by the Gothitelle. But they actually don't lead Gothitelle, and they lead Sinistcha and Lapras here, which I am fine with, as we can Spore into Lapras in order to delay the Perish Song for as long as possible, and we get to land Hypnosis into Sinistcha, so our opponent double does not get to move this turn, and Smeargle is moodying, and it gets the special defense boost right away, which is helpful, and we Soul Cure into Lapras, which means that over time we're going to be chipping away at this Lapras the longer it stays on the field, but Sinistcha gets a 1-turn Wake Up, and it gets to Trick Room, which is a little bit unfortunate, but we did lend Hypnosis into it, and now they swap in Amoonguss as we try to Nightshade into Lapras, and Lapras gets the 2-turn Wake Up, so it gets to go for Perish Song here, as we Soul Cured into Amoonguss, but they're eject button, so they just get to bring Sinistcha back in, and they heal up Lapras a little bit with Hospitality and Leftovers, but it gets taken back down by the Salt Cure here, and they don't have Gothitelle in right now, so I just decided to switch King Gambit, and now they decide to swap Gothitelle in, as Sinistcha starts getting set up with the Calm Mind, and we get to Spore into Gothitelle, so it won't be able to Fake Out King Gambit this turn, and they swap in Amoonguss here, and they Terra Fire their Sinistcha, where a Kowtow Cleave would have done a lot of damage into them, but now they can just continue to Calm Mind as we Shed Tail with Smeargle so that Hypno can come in and Hypno can't be put to sleep by Amoonguss, and I swap Smeargle in because Smeargle can't get put to sleep by Amoonguss, so we get to Hypnosis into Amoonguss as they Matcha Gotcha with Sinistcha, and a crit unfortunately breaks the sub on Hypno and it allows them to store a lot of health, and Smeargle goes down here, but now we're outside of Trick Room. And I thought Liquidation and Nightshade would be enough to pick up KO into Sinistcha, but unfortunately it is just barely not, as Sinistcha gets up the Trick Room again, and now we bring in King Gambit, and Amoonguss wakes up after 2 turns, I believe it was there, and gets to put to sleep our own Hypno, because we're not behind our Shed Tail sub, since the Sinistcha crit us, and you see how much that damage does there, as the Amoonguss Rage Powders for the Sinistcha not to get hit, and Sinistcha is just getting to spam Matcha Gotcha pretty much for free here, getting all of its health back, as Hypno is still asleep on its 2nd turn to sleep, and they slide Pollen Puff into Sinistcha as we Kowtow Amoonguss to at least try and get rid of Amoonguss. Like, we can have Tentacruel deal with Sinistcha later, we just need to get rid of Amoonguss right now, and Hypno takes its 3rd turn of sleep, so it doesn't get to move. As Kowtow Cleave comes out into Lapras, and it at least takes out Lapras, and we disable the Sinistcha from using the Matcha Gotcha, but it's Mental Herb, so it doesn't care, and it gets to click Matcha Gotcha again here. So now we're outside of Trick Room again, and the opponent still has Amoonguss, and we have Tentacruel, and Amoonguss protects this turn, as I figured it was going to Rage Powder, and if we just doubled into Sinistcha that turn with the Liquidation and the Kowtow Cleave, we would have been super good to win the game there, but they get to get up Trick Room again, and the Matcha Gotcha still does damage into Tentacruel, and we Liquidation Sinistcha again, and we watch Amoonguss switch in, so they give up their buffs, which also means they're not getting Sucker Punch, and we Liquidation Amoonguss, and we get the defense drop, which is good for us in the long run, but they Spore into Tentacruel here as we Kowtow Cleave into Amoonguss to get a good bit of damage into it, and Tentacruel still has its Black Sludge, so it's getting a lot of health back, and I tried to Sucker Punch into Gothitelle, since I figured King Gambit was probably going to go to sleep this turn, but Gothitelle substitutes, and Tentacruel gets the 1-turn Wake Up for the first time on our side during this game, so we get to take out the Amoonguss as Trick Room ends, and now we can just Terraflying Tentacruel in case they were going to do something weird where they, like, stalled, but we did not need that crit on the Sinistcha in order to knock it out there, and Gothitelle seems to only have a Dark Pulse, so it looks like we have this endgame locked out pretty well, where we can wait for King Gambit to wake up, but if it doesn't wake up, we can just use Tentacruel to knock off the Gothitelle substitute, and then, like, we could just Sword Stance with Tentacruel in order to get set up and just KO the Gothitelle faster. But yeah, that was a very long Perish Trap game where nothing actually got Perish Trapped, but man, things were really not going in our favor there for a sec, but it was nice at the end of the game that Tentacruel got the 1-turn Wake Up and was able to bring the game back. And lastly, we have a match against a Dondozo Tatsugiri team where it also looks like they have a sun component in the fact that they have Sableye for like manual sun in the sunny day, and then Talonflame takes advantage of the sun, and then Venusaur is just fast in the sun. So I decided to lead my best anti-Dozo answer in the Magmar and the Tentacruel because we have the clear smog there, and Hitmontop comes out, but Tentacruel doesn't care about it, and Magmar also doesn't really care about it. As they fake out Magmar, they don't get a burn there, we just get a free Poison Jab and a Tatsugiri, but unfortunately it's not enough to bring down Tatsugiri to a low enough health where it's 2-KO, but it's also leftovers. So we Poison Jab Tatsugiri again, and we don't get another poison there, as Icy Wind tries to speed drop us, and they close combat Magmar, but I went for the Clear Smog, thinking that they would swap in Dozo this turn, but they didn't do that, so Magmar, unfortunately, is just in a bit of a weird spot. Tatsugiri protects on this turn as we try Poison Jabbing into it, and Hitmontop goes for the close combat, but we're a Fairy type on Granbull, and we lowered its attack. And now they decide to finally swap in Dozo on the last turn that Tatsugiri was probably going to get hit, so we swap back in Malamar, and unfortunately, Poison Jab is going to dodge Tatsugiri, but we're not taunted anymore. And Granbull comes back in to try and lower Dondozo's attack, but they're Clear Amulet, so that doesn't happen. But they get good stopping Tantrum damage into Granbull, but we get to Clear Smog as we Terra Grass with Malamar, and we Follow Me with Malamar, and the Wave Crash would have definitely KO'd us previously with the ×2 boost, but because we got rid of that, Magmar gets to live for another day, and they Terra Grass their Dondozo here to go for the Terra Blast, which I don't really think that was necessary, but they are resistant to our Wild Charge now, which is a little unfortunate, but now we get to bring in Tentacruel, who just gets to Poison Jab into Dondozo, and we go for the Outrage because I didn't want to miss the Play Rough onto the Tatsugiri here. Unfortunately, I think that's a bit of a misplay, because now they just get to bring in Hitmontop and Talonflame, and we can't switch Granbull out for the Intimidate cycling, and Brave Bird does a lot of damage to Tentacruel, but Tentacruel gets to clap back Talonflame, as now it is just Hitmontop left on the field, and we bring in King Gambit here in the end, who Sucker Punches Hitmontop, and we Liquidation Hitmontop for a lot of damage, and close combat comes down to King Gambit, and of course is going to KO it in one hit, and it looks like we're going to win, but their Hitmontop has Sucker Punch, so they get to take out Tentacruel here, so just a bit of an unfortunate endgame there where they had another priority move that if they had like Mach Punch or Bullet Punch, Tentacruel would have at least resisted it. And if we hadn't locked Outrage with Granbull on that one turn, then Granbull would have been able to Intimidate cycle the Hitmontop so that we would have a better chance of living that Sucker Punch, as that one turn where they faked out into Granbull, King Gambit wouldn't have cared, and King Gambit also dies to the close combat the same way anyways. Also, our positioning around the Dozo was just kind of unfortunate, as we led Magmar, but Magmar took a lot of damage from the Hitmontop, while Hitmontop also didn't get burned. Like, Hitmontop getting burned there on the fake out or the close combat would have also made this game a lot easier, but we didn't get either of those procs. So yeah, that was the ARG team, and I mean, the Pokemon on this team were picked for specific reasons because they all have key parts of them that play into the ARG, but some of these Pokemon like Granbull and Hypno just have better Pokemon in the format to be used, and a lot of Pokemon on this team are dependent on the closed team sheets right now, even though all of them are just as viable in open team sheets. There are benefits and disbenefits for this Pokemon team going into open team sheet, as I feel like a lot of them are just pretty straightforward. Also on this team, I have some specific choices that were made to go along with the ARG. So if you notice anything that might not be optimal happening on a Pokemon, that might have to play into the ARG. Actually, this should just be... Hold on, wait, this is not right. This is not part of the ARG. This is just me being an idiot where I should have this at max. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things will help me out an absolute ton. And if you solve the RNG, I'll see you in the Discord server, where we're gonna, I don't know, talk about things for a while. I mean, I guess it depends on how many people are actually interested in solving the ARG, about how popular this Discord server is gonna be until I fully announce it publicly, but, you know. But I will see you in the next one. Thank you.